So first would be the superficially exposed organs, the salivary glands, the largest of which is the parotid gland. This is the external jugular vein, so they're always associated with each other. And then below the jaws, so this would be the mandible, and running alongside the external jugular vein is another salivary gland. So that's the submandibular or submaxillary gland. And then if you open the oral cavity, so this is the mouth or oral cavity or buccal cavity, this would be the tongue. It has a softer anterior portion and then a slightly harder posterior portion. So the tongue is equipped with papillae, different types of papillae. So just read your textbook, Hyman, for the different types of papillae which are equipped with taste buds. So the roof of the mouth is covered by the palate, specifically a secondary palate. This one with the transverse ridges is the hard palate, so if you touch it, it's supported by bone. And then posterior to it would be a softer portion of the palate, the soft palate. If you move posteriorly, here at the base of the tongue, you'll reach the oropharynx. And there's a structure here in the oropharynx. They're on either side of its walls. That's one of the palatine tonsils in its tonsillar fossa. And then if you probe above the soft palate, so that cavity on top would be the nasopharynx. It is continuous with the nasal cavities. So now here in the throat region, this one is the trachea, the windpipe. This is where air goes, and food and water will go down a different tube just behind the trachea. This would be the esophagus. So behind the trachea is the esophagus, where water and food goes. So here in the pharynx, water, food, and air intersect and go down their separate ways. So this flap of cartilage here is the epiglottis, which closes the opening into the trachea, the glottis, when you're swallowed, so you don't aspirate water and food. So the one that I'm probing is the glottis. So you can see it goes down to the trachea. And then on the back side would be the entrance into the esophagus there. Okay, so that's the epiglottis, flap of cartilage. The voice box region, or the larynx, is this region here, equipped with cartilages, the largest of which is your Adam's apple, the thyroid cartilage. And then below it is a ring-shaped cartilage, the cricoid. Cricoid cartilage, thyroid cartilage, trachea. On the back side of the glottis are paired cartilages. These are the arytenoid cartilages. So now these are the two pleural cavities, left and right. So air coming from the trachea goes down here, and the trachea will split into two primary bronchi, and then will split into many bronchioles, and then eventually reach the alveoli of the lungs for gas exchange. So there's a right lung, left lung. Okay. And then there are lobes of the lung. In the right lobe there's an anterior, anterior, middle, and there's a posterior lobe of the right lung. So the posterior lobe of the right lung is further subdivided into a lateral lobule, the one you're seeing immediately, and a medial lobule there tucked inside the caval fold. So it's inside there, the medial lobule of the right posterior lobe of the lung. And this dome-shaped muscle is the diaphragm, the primary or the main breathing muscle that you use. On the left side, so the left lung is also divided into anterior, small, middle, and then posterior left lobe of the lung. So unlike in the right lung, there's no lateral and medial lobule. Okay, so there's the caval fold. And this one smack in the middle is the heart, which is contained inside its own cavity, the pericardial cavity. So you see it's covered by coelomic membrane, and the cavity covered by this membrane inside would be the pericardial cavity. The one that I'm pulling is the parietal pericardium or pericardial sac. This one here is gland or gland-like structure at the base of the heart is the thymus gland. Produces white blood cells, specifically T cells. On the left pleural cavity, if you shove aside the left lung, near the spine, you'll see two tubes running down. So this one is the esophagus. So it's a continuation of that tube here that we saw from the throat. This is the esophagus, goes down here in the pleural cavity, and it's that one. The more dorsal tube is the dorsal thoracic aorta. So it carries deoxygenated blood coming from the heart. So this is the heart, and there's an aorta arching towards the back side of the thorax. That's the dorsal thoracic aorta. In the peritoneal cavity, or also called as the abdominal cavity, you'll see most of the visceral organs. So once you open it, you'll immediately see the large lobes of the liver, but in this case I already cut the lobes of the liver to have a better look of deeper structures there. So the liver has a left lobe and right lobe, further subdivided into median and lateral lobes. So you can look up the cat video. It's practically the same structures in the cat. So this is the stomach, an expanded portion of the alimentary canal where food is temporarily stored and proteins are digested. So I don't know if you can see, there's the esophagus here, and then enters the stomach. So the stomach has a greater curvature and the concave lesser curvature. The portion nearest the esophagus would be the cardia, and this portion here is the fundus. This is the body of the stomach, and then it tapers off before it enters the small intestine as the pylorus. There's a smooth muscle sphincter that regulates the passage of chyme to the small intestine. Okay, that's the pyloric sphincter. And technically this is already the small intestine, but it's very long, subdivided into different segments. All of these are small intestines. This one is already the large intestine or colon, and it terminates down here in the descending colon down to the pelvic cavity as the rectum, and then to the anus. So this first portion, the one adjacent to the pyloric end of the stomach, is the duodenum. This is the duodenum. And then the largest segment of the small intestine, all of these are parts of the jejunum. And then before the small intestine enters the large intestine, here, this one is the ileum, the last segment of the small intestine. And then it enters now into this rounded structure, the sacculus rotundus. Sacculus rotundus, ileum. And then from the sacculus rotundus, it branches out, right? So pre-digested food can go down into the ascending colon with all these hostrae. The segmented appearance are the hostrae. And there's a smooth muscle band here, longitudinally oriented, called the tinea. The tinea is the ascending colon. But typically, the food coming from the ileum will go first to this large organ here in the rabbit, which is the cecum. So this is where symbiotic microbes live and help the rabbit digest all those fibrous material. So this is the cecum of the rabbit. So it's gonna spend some time there digesting all those fiber. And if you follow the cecum more distally, it terminates into a worm-like organ here called the appendix. So this is the appendix. Ascending colon. From the ascending colon, food passes through the transverse colon and then to the descending colon. Descending colon, descending into the pelvic cavity. Once inside the pelvic cavity, it's now called the rectum. And then feces go down to the anus. There's a black organ here beside the stomach, that's the spleen. Breaks down old red blood cells. And then there's supposed to be a mesentery here in the duodenum, in which you will find the pancreatic tissues. So this is a remnant. Those brown stuff there is the pancreas. It's beside the duodenum. So one of its functions is to secrete some of the digestive enzymes, many digestive enzymes, into the duodenum so that the food can be completely digested. So there's the lateral right lobe of the liver. So if you look here in the lesser omentum, there's a mesentery there covering some of the structures, but I already ripped it apart to better see them. So that mesentery that I destroyed would be the lesser omentum. So if we look underneath the liver, there's a green sac there. That's a gallbladder for the storage of bile. And there, the duct of the gallbladder is the cystic duct. And then this is one of the hepatic ducts. So the liver produces the bile, secretes it to their hepatic ducts, and then temporarily stored into the gallbladder. The combination of the hepatic and cystic duct is called a common bile duct, and you can see that it goes straight for the duodenum. So the bile, when you've just eaten, when the rabbit has just eaten, will be secreted into the duodenum to help with the digestion of fat. And there's a large vein here. It's a hepatic portal vein. This one is the right kidney. That's the left kidney. So this mesentery in between the spleen and the stomach is the gastrosplenic ligament. This one is the greater omentum. This one supporting the jejunum would be the mesentery proper. Lots of blood vessels for the absorption of those nutrients. And if you look into the descending colon, there's also mesentery. That's the mesocolon. It's a postcaval vein. For the urogenital system, you have the kidneys. This is the left kidney. Those are the renal blood vessels. Specifically, the large one is the renal vein, collecting filtered blood from the kidneys. And adjacent to it would be the renal artery, that white one, delivering unfiltered blood to the kidneys. And then a kidney will filter it, produce urine in the process, and then sends it back to the renal vein. So the urine containing the waste will be flushed down to the ureter, this long white string-like organ. Ureter will send the urine to this sac, the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder has an immovable fundus, and then the movable part would be the apex. And then call of nature, from the urinary bladder, urine goes down to the urethra. If you make a frontal section of the kidney, you'll see some of the parts. So that outer layer is the cortex, the inner darker layer is the medulla. So that pointy end is the renal papilla. So I don't know if you can see, there are white streaks there in the renal medulla. If you look microscopically, those would be the location of the collecting tubules, collecting all the urine from the microscopic nephrons here. So those white streaks are the collecting tubules, and all of them converge at the renal papilla, the pointy end. So together, the collecting tubules and the renal papilla compose a renal pyramid. So in the rabbit as well as in the cat, there's only one renal pyramid, but in humans there are more. So this cavity here is the renal sinus. That white expanded portion of the ureter is called the renal pelvis. That's this one, the ureter. But that's the expanded proximal portion of the ureter, the renal pelvis. For the reproductive system of a male rabbit, we'll start with the gonad here outside of the body wall, unique in mammals. It's a testis, contained by the scrotum. This one is the scrotum. If you make a skin incision of the scrotum, there's a white sheet of fascia there called the tunica vaginalis. So before you reach the testes, you'll reach the tunica vaginalis first. This one. The skin is the scrotum. And the cavity where the testes are large, vaginal sac. Vaginal sac. So the vaginal sac is embryologically, it is derived as an out-pocketing of the abdominal cavity. So this is the vaginal sac. So testes, sperm cells are produced inside seminiferous tubules of the testes, and then once mature, they're sent off to the epididymis. So epididymis, head of epididymis, body of the epididymis, tail of the epididymis. Then the sperm, upon ejaculation, will travel via the ductus deferens or vas deferens. So in life, the vas deferens is associated with other blood vessels and nerves, servicing the testes, and together they comprise the spermatic cord. So I already dissociated the ductus deferens from the rest. So together, all of those blood vessels and ductus deferens will enter and penetrate the abdomen and will emerge here in the abdominal cavity. So while the rest of the spermatic cord goes straight up, you can see that the vas deferens makes a U-turn down there behind the urinary bladder, because the goal is for the sperm to reach here, the penis, where the urogenital opening is located. So this is the penis. That black end is the glans penis. When you skin the penis, you'll see the shaft of the penis. Then let's open the pelvic cavity. This is the urethra coming from the urinary bladder. Only urine passes through the urethra. And then this is the ductus deferens passing behind and entering this one, seminal vesicles, which contributes to the seminal fluid or semen. So ductus deferens, seminal vesicle. There's a bulge there. Prostate gland also contributes to the seminal fluid. And then from there, the urethra will combine with the sperm ducts to form the urogenital sinus. The urogenital sinus penetrates inside the penis as the cavernous urethra, also called the spongy urethra. And then there's a common opening for the sperm and urine at the tip of the glans penis.